Every day you are provoked. A rude driver cuts you off. A colleague talks over you. A loved one pushes your buttons. The modern world dares you to react, to be triggered, to flare up, snap back, or crumble in depression. But reaction is not strength. It is reflex. It is animal. The Stoics taught us that we are not just creatures of impulse, we are creatures of reason. There is a split second between the event and the emotion. In that gap lies your power. To react is to surrender. To respond is to decide. The difference is not subtle. It is the foundation of who you are. Reacting is instinctual. Responding is intentional. It is not about being passive. It is about being principled. The Stoics did not run from conflict. They walked through it with clarity. When the world shouted, they remained still. When insulted, they examined. When pushed, they chose how to move. This is not just philosophy. It is a way of walking through chaos with grace. It is how you keep your power when everything tries to take it. In this video, we'll explore how to stop reacting and start responding, how to become the calm within the storm, the strength within the silence. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Anatomy of Reaction. Reaction is often praised as authenticity, but the Stoics knew better. They saw reaction as a failure of preparation, a moment when the passions outrun the mind. Seneca called anger a temporary madness. He did not say this to shame emotion, but to warn us. When you let emotion take the wheel, you don't know where you'll end up. The body reacts before the mind has a chance to reflect. A raised voice, a clenched fist, a defensive word, all of it erupts before you even realize what you're doing. This is natural, yes, but the Stoic doesn't aim for natural. They aim for noble. And nobility requires awareness. It requires asking, what am I actually responding to? Is it the insult, or is it my ego being bruised? The Stoics believed in preparing the mind daily, just as a warrior prepares their weapons, not once, not occasionally, but with deliberate repetition. This was not a poetic metaphor to them, it was a necessity. Just as a soldier would never step onto the battlefield without sharpening their sword, the Stoic would never enter the day without sharpening their awareness. To go into the world without mental preparation is to guarantee that you'll be governed by impulse rather than intention. Reaction is what happens when you show up untrained, when the mind is dull, and the emotions are raw and unexamined. It's like attempting to steer a ship without a compass, easily swayed, easily sunk. It is the default mode of someone who hasn't rehearsed for reality, who lives at the mercy of their mood. Most people are caught in this loop, responding not to what is, but to how they feel in the moment. Their reactions are echoes of habit, not expressions of thought. They become prisoners of the emotional weather inside them. But responding is different. Responding comes from a mind that has sat in stillness before the chaos began. It is not spontaneous. It is practiced. It's cultivated in the hours no one sees, in the quiet mornings before the world intrudes, in the reflections that follow the day's events. It is built slowly, layer by layer, through the practice of pausing when the pressure builds and choosing clarity over chaos. The response is born from patience, from discipline, from the unglamorous work of studying your own mind. It is the work done in private that reveals its power in public. Responding is what happens when you've walked through your thoughts before the day throws its weight at you, when you've sat with your anger, named your fears, and refused to let emotion dictate your path. You've rehearsed for adversity with the same seriousness others apply to winning accolades. You don't stumble into composure. You don't arrive there by accident. You cultivate it like a garden, tending to it daily, pruning what is unhelpful, watering what is wise, and those storms, they will come. In many forms, the unexpected email that shakes your confidence, the harsh comment that questions your worth, the broken plans that test your patience, the silence that follows when you hope to be heard. These trials do not show up on a schedule. The world guarantees these moments with ruthless regularity. It doesn't warn you. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait until you're ready. It simply arrives, uninvited, often when you're most vulnerable. That is why the Stoic prepares daily, with diligence and humility. They do not prepare because they expect disaster. They prepare because they understand the human condition. They prepare not with anxiety, but with anticipation, not with dread, but with wisdom. They read the thoughts of those who came before. They reflect on their past failures and victories. They observe their inner landscape as a sailor studies the sky, searching for signs, for patterns, for clarity. They do not wait until the fire is burning to learn how to hold the hose. They practice calm as a discipline until it becomes second nature. They become fluent in calm so that when chaos visits, it finds no host, no open door, no invitation. And in doing so, they remain steady not because they were lucky, not because they were untouched by hardship, not because they avoided difficulty, but because they were ready. Ready in mind, ready in spirit, anchored in principle, not floating in emotion. They became unmoved, not because they turned off their feelings, but because they learned how to direct them. And in that inner control, they found outer strength. Start noticing your triggers. Don't wait for a meltdown or major confrontation. Begin with the subtle moments, the tightening of your jaw, the shift in your tone, the internal monologue that speeds up. These are early signs that reaction is building beneath the surface. Track the moments when you feel yourself reacting, even in small ways, a snappy response, a sarcastic thought, a withdrawal of energy. These signals, while often overlooked, are gold for self-discovery. Ask yourself afterward, what did I feel? Was it embarrassment, hurt, pride, or fear? Go beyond the surface reaction and dig for the emotion that drove it. Then ask, what did I do? Replay the scene in your mind with clarity, not judgment. Could you have paused? Could you have listened longer? Could you have chosen different words or simply stayed silent? And finally, ask, what could I have done instead? What response would have aligned more with the person you aspire to be rather than the emotion of the moment? Write these reflections down, return to them. This process builds awareness, the first layer of response. It is not a one-time exercise, but a continuous practice, a daily habit of mapping your inner terrain so that over time you stop reacting unconsciously and start responding with clarity and control. The more intimately you know your triggers, the more masterful you become at navigating them. Chapter 2. Between Stimulus and Response. Viktor Frankl, though not a Stoic, said something deeply Stoic. Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. The Stoics lived in that space. They built their whole philosophy around it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That is not just encouragement. It is a demand, a call to anchor your life in reason, not impulse. That space between the event and your action is where your character is forged. Most people never pause long enough to enter it. To respond is not to delay endlessly. It is to introduce intention, to invite reason into the room before you act. It is a pause filled with purpose and clarity, a sacred interruption to the cascade of automatic behavior. It is the moment where you hold the mirror up and ask yourself, not what feels good, not what relieves the pressure fastest, but what is good, what is noble, what aligns with the person you are striving to become. To respond means you interrupt the momentum of emotion and install clarity, awareness, and discipline in its place. It means you speak from a deeper place, not from the current of chaos. It is to ask, what would virtue do here? What would wisdom say? What would courage look like now? What would integrity choose in this moment if it were behind the wheel? What choice would honor my future self, not just satisfy my current mood? This kind of pause doesn't make you weaker. It makes you stronger in the most meaningful sense. It is the weightlifter's core stability, the archer's breath before the release. It is the unglamorous yet extraordinary ability to hold yourself intact when everything around you demands that you fall apart. It doesn't make you slower. It makes you sharper, more precise, more in tune with the deeper truth of the moment. It doesn't mean you've failed to act quickly. It means you've chosen to act correctly. It means you have wrestled back authorship of your life from the whims of emotion and placed it back in the hands of intention. Because you're not reacting to the noise of the world, you're responding to what actually matters. You're filtering the chaos through the sieve of principle, discarding the distractions and choosing the signal over the static. You've sifted through the chaos, ignored the bait, and returned to principle, not just once, but again and again, each time more deliberately. You've chosen to stand where you are solid, not where you are soft, on the ground of your values, not the shifting sands of mood or pressure. This is not detachment from life, it is full engagement with what truly counts. This is the response of the disciplined, the kind of person who has trained themselves not just to act, but to act with meaning. The Stoic does not drift into response. They walk into it with eyes open, with intention sharpened by reflection. This is the mindset of the Stoic, the one who is unshaken not because they're emotionless, but because they've done the inner work. Their response is anchored in something deeper than feeling. It is anchored in reason, in virtue, in timeless truth. Their identity is not built on impulse, but on principle. They are not puppets of the external, but masters of the internal. The world may swirl and scream around them, demands, insults, distractions, urgencies, but the Stoic answers not with volume, but with clarity, not with panic, but with presence, not with reaction, but with choice. And in doing so, they become not just calm, they become powerful, because in that calm, they hold the rarest kind of power, the ability to remain themselves, no matter what tries to change them. When something upsets you, repeat to yourself, "I will not be pulled out of myself." Say it gently but firmly, as if anchoring yourself back into your own body and mind. Let those words echo in your inner world like a bell in a quiet temple. Breathe, not shallow, reactive breaths, but slow, deep ones that travel through your spine and down to the floor beneath you. Let your breath remind your nervous system that you are safe, that you are in control, that you are not at the mercy of the moment. Then choose a response aligned with the person you want to be, not the mood you happen to be in. Ask yourself, what would my highest self do here? What would I want to remember about this moment 5 years from now? What would the version of me I'm trying to become say or not say right now? Instead of letting the upset push you, let it guide you inward, to composure, to wisdom, to poise. Let every upset become a cue, not for reaction, but for reconnection. With practice, this becomes not just a tactic, but a trait, part of the rhythm of who you are becoming. Chapter 3. The Power of the Pause. The Stoics didn't teach detachment for the sake of coldness. They taught it for the sake of clarity. Detachment is not apathy, it is perspective. It is the deliberate decision to rise above the immediate emotional wave, not to deny that wave exists. It's the pause before the punch, the breath before the outburst, the walk before the reply. In that pause, you remember who you are, not just what you feel, but what you stand for. You create a space wide enough for reason to re-enter. That space is sacred. It is the arena of choice, where impulse surrenders to principle. In today's world, that space is shrinking at an alarming rate. We are trained to react instantly. Notifications buzz like commands. Tweets demand outrage. Texts crave response. Algorithms are designed to bypass reflection and hit the nerve of immediacy. We are conditioned to reply before we've even processed, and in doing so, we lose control of the most important thing we have, our inner state. We hand over our rhythm to the tempo of the crowd, our peace to the volatility of public opinion. We let the world dictate not only our responses, but our sense of self. But the Stoic pauses. They step back, not because they are passive or disengaged, but because they are powerful enough to delay gratification. They don't sacrifice clarity for the illusion of urgency. They create space between the event and themselves. A breath, a thought, a simple delay. And in that space they reclaim authority over their own mind. Why? Because in that space they find control. They reclaim authorship. They resist being defined by chaos. They decide what version of themselves the world will see, and more importantly, what version of themselves they will become. This pause is not weakness, it is mastery. It is not absence, it is presence. It is not silence from emptiness, but silence from strength. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." He didn't mean we should suppress our feelings or pretend nothing affects us. He meant we should understand the feeling before we act from it. He meant that emotion, if left unchecked, becomes a tyrant, but if examined, becomes a teacher. To pause is to sit with the discomfort long enough to understand what it's really saying. Is it about the moment or about something deeper? Is it about this person or an old wound? Is it about justice or about ego? The pause lets the heat pass. It lets the fog clear. It drains the adrenaline that clouds judgment. It separates the story from the facts, the illusion from reality, the signal from the noise. It reminds you that not everything demands your reaction, and very little is truly urgent when seen through the lens of wisdom. The pause invites a higher voice into the conversation, the wiser self that often remains silent in the heat of the moment. It invites wisdom to take the place of instinct. It allows the better voice in your head to speak, the one shaped by values, experience, and thoughtfulness, not impulse. And then, and only then, do you move. Not as a victim of the moment, not as someone swept away, but as a master of your response. You are not running from emotion. You are guiding it. You are not suppressing it. You are shaping it into something worthy. You walk into your action not because you're provoked, but because you are resolved, because your mind is still and your values are clear. You do not strike because you were struck. You strike only when it aligns with principle, when it furthers what is just. You act because you have chosen to, not because you were triggered, not because your ego was bruised, but because this is what integrity calls for. You do not speak to prove something. You speak to build something, to heal something, to clarify something. You do not move to defend your ego. You move to honor your principles. Your motion is no longer chaotic. It is calibrated. It is not a discharge of feeling. It is a display of alignment. You speak not because you were provoked, but because there is something meaningful to say, something that elevates rather than escalates, something rooted in clarity rather than chaos. You understand that silence can often say more than 100 loud words, and that sometimes silence itself is the loudest wisdom. You no longer feel the need to jump in just to fill the void or defend yourself at every perceived attack. When you do choose to speak, your words are weighted with purpose. They don't wound, they reveal. They illuminate your values, express your intention, and often redirect conflict into understanding. They come not from ego, but from essence. The Stoic knows, in restraint there is strength, in the pause there is power. In the delay, there is wisdom. In the stillness, there is strategy. In measured speech, there is mastery. And in that stillness, there is the most radical form of freedom, the freedom to remain yourself. Not once, not occasionally, but consistently, habitually, instinctively, even when the world does its best to make you forget. Even when your emotions scream for revenge. Even when your pride begs for validation. Even when everything in you wants to lash out, collapse, or give in. You remember, control begins within. And from that control, all true power flows. The kind of power that doesn't rise and fall with external events, but endures quietly, deeply, because it is rooted in the unshakable ground of who you've chosen to be. The kind of power that speaks without shouting, that stands without needing applause. Create a rule. When you're upset, do not reply for 10 minutes. No matter how urgent the situation feels, no matter how justified your emotions seem, resist the temptation to act immediately. This short delay is not a dismissal of your feelings. It is an act of mastery over them. It's a declaration that your feelings are worth understanding, but not obeying blindly. Use that time to step away from the noise. Walk, breathe, sit in silence. Let the adrenaline slow. Let the stories settle. Write down what you're feeling, what story your mind is telling, and what your wiser self might say in response. Let the surge settle so your clarity can rise. Let the emotional fog dissipate until you can see not only what happened, but how you want to carry it. Those 10 minutes are not wasted. They are an investment. In those minutes, you create a gap wide enough to re-enter your integrity, to realign with your values, and to see the situation from a higher vantage point. It's not avoidance. It's sharpening the blade before using it. It's stepping back so that when you move with purpose, not as a weapon of emotion, but as a vessel of wisdom. It's the art of transforming noise into signal, reaction into response. What you say after 10 minutes of grounded reflection will carry 10 times more weight than anything you say in the heat of reaction. It will not only represent who you are, it will reinforce who you're becoming. Make this rule non-negotiable. Protect it. Practice it. Let it become part of your identity. It will change the way people experience you, and more importantly, how you experience yourself. Chapter 4. Silence is a weapon of the wise. When insulted, the average person strikes back. They lash out not necessarily because they're certain of what they're saying, but because the sting of ego demands immediate relief. The wise person, however, stays silent. Not because they lack the words or the will to defend themselves, but because they have mastered the discipline not to be provoked by noise. Silence is not surrender. It is a decision, a form of inner governance, a weapon sharpened by restraint and wielded with precision. It says, "I do not dance at every invitation to conflict." The Stoics were not loud. They didn't argue their worth. They demonstrated it through consistent, grounded action. They didn't explain their virtue. They embodied it so fully that no defense was needed. And they understood that silence often speaks louder than any response. It is the presence of self-command in a world addicted to reaction. Marcus Aurelius faced constant betrayal, slander, and deceit from those around him, including some within his own family and inner circle. Yet he rarely responded with public anger or vengeful speeches. He responded with character, with justice, with steadfast adherence to his principles. And in doing so, he left behind a legacy not of noise, but of depth. To not respond is sometimes the highest form of response, because silence in the right moment is not emptiness, it's elevation. It's the restraint that allows dignity to lead instead of ego. It's the choice to value peace over performance, clarity over chaos. Silence in this context is not the result of indecision, but the result of deliberate self-command. It's the quiet that refuses to feed the fire. It's the space where wisdom chooses to reside. Not every provocation deserves your energy. Not every insult is worthy of a reply. Not every invitation to conflict must be accepted. The Stoics knew that attention is currency, and like any currency, it must be spent with precision and purpose. Every time you respond to something beneath your values, you fund its continuation. You keep it alive by validating it with your focus. You give your peace away to a thief who doesn't even know your name. But when you refuse, when you remain unmoved, you starve it of the fuel it seeks. You reclaim that energy for something nobler, your growth, your clarity, your character. You preserve your center by denying energy to the things that try to destabilize it. This practice is not weakness, it is not indifference. It is an unshakable prioritization of principle over provocation. It's knowing that energy spent on pettiness cannot be spent on purpose, that every reply carries a cost, and every engagement writes a chapter in your story. The Stoic is not uninterested in truth. They are uninterested in noise. They choose their battles as a sculptor chooses their tools, with deliberate vision and restraint. Where you spend your attention reveals your priorities, and when you spend it on what is beneath you, you shrink your potential to meet that low standard. But when you guard it, when you direct it toward discipline, self-mastery, and serenity, you elevate not only yourself, but everyone around you. The Stoics spent their attention on what they could control, on their thoughts, on their values, on the state of their own soul. They did not waste their days shadowboxing strangers. They invested that sacred attention in cultivating equanimity, in practicing discipline, in honoring their principles with consistency and grace. They nurtured inner peace not by fleeing the world, but by standing within it as unmoved witnesses. The Stoic did not run from conflict because they were afraid of confrontation, but because they understood what battles were worth their sword. They knew that every act of defense was a decision to participate, and not all participation was necessary or noble. They understood that not every engagement is a fight for truth. Some are just ego wrestling with ego, noise clashing with more noise, and nothing worthwhile rising from the dust. They saw that the loudest voices are often the most reactive ones, and that silence, when rooted in principle, is far more commanding than any shouted rebuttal. They let fools talk. They let critics echo. They understood that responding out of pride only fanned flames that would otherwise die in stillness. They did not need to respond because their lives were their response, their consistency, their actions, their peace. These spoke louder than any argument ever could. The Stoics' example stood as a quiet rebuke to the chaos around them, and while others flailed about in ego-driven defense, scrambling to prove, to protect, to retaliate, the Stoic directed their inner fire toward the practice of being unshakable. They conserved their strength for what mattered most, what they were building, who they were becoming, how they chose to live. They knew that every distraction carried a cost, and they guarded their focus like a fortress. They practiced discipline not just in action, but in attention. They asked, "Is this worthy of my energy? Will this make me better?" And if the answer was no, they let it pass. Their silence was not absence, it was the echo of mastery. It was not avoidance, it was elevation. It was the signal of sovereignty. It was the refusal to be moved by what was never worth their stillness. It was the knowing that peace is not weakness, but control refined into clarity. Their calm was not passive. It was a disciplined, deliberate choice to remain seated in their power, a conscious resistance to the chaos that surrounds the reactive mind. The next time someone insults you or speaks out of turn, say nothing, not out of spite, but out of strength. Hold the silence as a shield, not as retreat. In that stillness, you say more than any clever comeback ever could. You signal that your peace is not up for negotiation, that your presence is not so easily disturbed. Let the noise pass like a gust of wind through trees, felt but never permanent. Remain rooted. Let your actions speak for your values. Let the consistency of your character respond to the inconsistency of others. Let the life you live become the most undeniable answer to the doubts, the criticism, and the petty provocations. Let your stability make their chaos uncomfortable, because real strength isn't proved by argument, it's proved by behavior. The way you walk away, the way you continue to do what is right, the way you grow instead of shrink, that is the most eloquent reply. Let time reveal your clarity. Let it show, slowly and inevitably, that silence was wisdom. That reaction would have cost you peace, but response preserved your power, and that every time you chose stillness, you stepped closer to the version of yourself that nothing can shake. Chapter 5. Emotional Alchemy. The Stoics didn't just manage emotions, they transformed them. They turned anger into resolve, pain into depth, frustration into fuel. This is emotional alchemy, and it begins when you stop reacting to your emotions as final truths and start using them as signals. You are not what you feel. You are what you choose to do with what you feel. The Stoics saw every emotional surge not as an enemy, but as raw material, a fire that, if harnessed, could forge the soul rather than scorch it. Emotions are natural. They arise uninvited. They can be intense, unexpected, and overwhelming. But it is our relationship to them that defines who we become. The Stoic is not emotionless. They are emotionally disciplined. You can feel something without obeying it. You can acknowledge the storm within without being thrown by its winds. Just because you're angry doesn't mean you must rage. Just because you're afraid doesn't mean you must flee. Just because you're anxious doesn't mean you must shrink. Emotion offers energy, but that energy is directionless until reason enters. It is a current with no compass until you place your hands on the wheel. The Stoic sees emotion not as a dictator, but as a messenger, a flashing light on the dashboard, not the driver of the car. That warning light is important, but it is not the command center. You do not ignore it, but you also do not hand it the keys. You are disturbed, says Epictetus, not by things, but by your opinion of things. This quote is not a denial of suffering, but a reorientation of power. It reminds us that we are not merely at the mercy of what happens, we are architects of our interpretation. And if this is true, then emotion is not the source of suffering, interpretation is. Emotion is the signal, interpretation is the sculptor. This shift is subtle, but everything changes when you stop believing that how you feel is who you are. Emotions are experiences, not identities. They are passing visitors, not permanent tenants. They pass through. They are not permanent residents. They speak a language that, when understood, can lead to wisdom, but when mistaken as truth, can distort your reality. When you begin to treat emotions not as facts, but as signals, you gain the upper hand. You step into a position of stewardship over your inner world. You are no longer swept away by the storm. You become the observer of it, the interpreter of its winds, and the one who chooses how to navigate its course. You create room between stimulus and response. That space is where self-mastery is born. It's where you ask better questions, make better decisions, and reclaim authorship of your behavior. The Stoic recognizes the emotion, then decides what to do with it. They acknowledge it, examine it, and then translate it into action, or non-action, that aligns with their highest values. They do not react blindly. They interrogate it, hold it up to the light, and ask, where did this come from? Is it rooted in truth or assumption? Is it justified? Is it useful? Is this my judgment or my clarity speaking? Will this feeling move me closer to the person I aspire to be or farther away? They turn the surge inward, into discipline, into clarity, into stillness. They don't just resist the emotion, they reshape it. They repurpose its energy into the service of virtue. They create meaning from emotion rather than chaos. They mold it into intention, direction, and resilience. They don't deny the storm, they channel it. They study it, harness it, and move forward with a steadiness that appears effortless, but is born of practice. They channel the storm into strength, into deep, focused motion that honors principle, not impulse. Because the goal is not to eliminate emotion, but to elevate it, not to reject it, but to refine it, not to suppress it, but to master it, to let it sharpen rather than shatter, to let it deepen your wisdom rather than dictate your decisions, to use it as a sculptor uses chisel and hammer, to carve a life that is steady, honest, and free. That is the Stoic way. When a strong emotion rises, name it. Say, "This is anger," or "This is fear." Naming it gives you distance. Then ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" And how can I act in line with virtue, not just emotion? Chapter 6. Let the world be wrong about you. One of the greatest temptations to react is the desire to correct the world's perception of you. You hear the false rumor, feel the sting of misunderstanding, and your first urge is to set the record straight. The impulse is strong, to clarify, to argue, to present all the evidence of your innocence. But the Stoics would caution, let the world be wrong about you. Let them talk, let them assume, let them build stories around shadows. And in the silence of your self-restraint, let your character tell the real story. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury, not to retaliate, not to explain, but to rise above." It is the ego that begs to be understood. It is virtue that is content with being true. The desire to explain is rarely for truth's sake. It is often for our pride. We want others to see us as right, as good, as innocent. But the Stoic understands that being right is more important than being seen as right. Reputation can be stolen. Integrity cannot. The need to correct others often arises from insecurity. It comes from the deep discomfort of being misunderstood, of having your character distorted or your intentions questioned. When your sense of self is fragile, every misunderstanding feels like a threat to your identity. You feel compelled to defend yourself, not because you are being harmed in truth, but because your ego feels exposed. But when you know who you are, when you've built your inner life on solid principles, you don't flinch when others get it wrong. You remain unmoved, not from arrogance, but from understanding. You've outgrown the need to be validated by those who do not know the full measure of your journey. A calm soul does not rush to defend its name. It doesn't scramble to manage optics or correct every passing misjudgment. It holds fast, not because it doesn't care, but because it knows the cost of chasing every opinion. It proves itself in silence, in presence, in the unwavering consistency of its character. Your life becomes your defense. You do not explain your virtue, you live it. You do not defend your worth, you demonstrate it. Day by day, choice by choice, you let your habits narrate what words no longer need to say. You are not what others say you are. You are not the rumors, nor the assumptions, nor the shallow readings of surface-level observers. You are what you repeatedly do. You are the patterns of your behavior, the principles you stand on, the values you will not compromise even when misunderstood. You are the standards you live by when no one is watching, not the projections of someone else's narrative. If your deeds are clear, time will defend you better than your words ever could. Words may be twisted. Actions, lived consistently, tell a story no rumor can erase. Time reveals all things. It unveils the reality behind appearances, the fruit behind the promise. And in the end, truth does not need a spokesman. It only needs to be walked out patiently, honorably, and without compromise. Resist the urge to clarify or defend yourself when misunderstood. You are not obligated to explain your every move to those who are committed to misunderstanding you. Choose silence, not as retreat, but as strength. When you refrain from defending yourself, you conserve energy for what truly matters, living with integrity. Turn that energy inward, reflect, reaffirm your commitments. Remind yourself of what you stand for. Write down your principles instead, not for others, but for yourself. Keep a record of the truths you live by. Let your journal become your courtroom and your conscience your judge. Revisit these values regularly. They will center you in moments of doubt and remind you that clarity begins with inner alignment, not public approval. Let your daily actions become your statement. Show up with excellence when no one is watching. Be kind when it's least expected. Be honest when it costs you something. Be calm when provoked. Let your consistency speak where your words fall short. And trust that, in time, those who need to see the truth will see it. Not because you forced it, but because you lived it so vividly that it could not be denied. Chapter 7. Turning off the inner megaphone. Reactions aren't always external. Some of the loudest responses happen inside your own mind. You replay the conversation. You fantasize about what you should have said. You write invisible speeches in your head. This is noise. This is mental reaction, and it is exhausting. You may appear calm on the outside, but inside you're wrestling with ghosts, voices that replay, revise, and reinforce narratives that often aren't even accurate. The mind becomes a courtroom without end, and you're both the accused and the judge. The mental noise is subtle, but it shapes how you feel, how you speak, and eventually how you live. The Stoic practice of inner stillness is about quieting the mental megaphone. It's about recognizing that every thought doesn't deserve a podium. Just because your mind says something doesn't mean it's wise or even true. You don't have to answer every internal complaint. You don't have to chase down every hypothetical scenario your mind invents. The Stoic becomes a gatekeeper, not of external chaos, but of internal chatter. They choose which thoughts to entertain, which to examine, and which to dismiss. Marcus Aurelius journaled daily not to express every thought, but to interrogate them. He challenged his assumptions. He reminded himself of what mattered. This inner audit is crucial, because if you don't master your thoughts, they will master you. They will become the unseen architects of your emotions, your choices, your worldview, and eventually you'll react not to reality, but to the unfiltered noise of your own mind. The Stoic doesn't just ask, "What should I say?" but "What should I think?" Their internal response is the foundation for every outward action. They seek to respond to the world from a mind that is still, not stormy. Because clarity isn't just a way of speaking, it's a way of seeing. And stillness isn't the absence of thought, it's the presence of judgment, direction, and calm. Each evening, write down 3 emotional thoughts you had during the day. Then ask, is this thought useful? Is it true? What would the wise person believe instead? Chapter 8. Practice in the small moments. Self-mastery is not built during grand trials. It is built in the smallest of moments, when you're cut off in traffic, when your coffee spills, when someone speaks over you. These are the training grounds for the Stoic. Not the stage, but the backstage. Not the performance, but the rehearsal. The seemingly trivial inconveniences of life are where true composure is forged. You don't become unshakable overnight. You become unshakable one unnoticed irritation at a time. The mistake is waiting for a major crisis to suddenly become composed. But the Stoics trained for adversity by practicing in the mundane. The daily irritations are not interruptions to your development. They are the development. If you cannot control your temper over a late train, how will you stay composed during betrayal? If you cannot remain calm when criticized at work, how will you face real loss with dignity? Mastery under pressure is not spontaneous. It is cultivated in the ordinary. You are either rehearsing reaction or rehearsing response in everything you do. Epictetus reminded his students, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." You do this by turning daily inconveniences into daily lessons, by treating each minor frustration as a chance to practice the pause, to direct the inner dialogue, to respond rather than react. You rehearse patience in the supermarket line. You practice resilience when your plans are delayed. You refine clarity when chaos nips at your heels. These aren't detours, they are invitations. Invitations to embody the principles you claim to admire, not just when it's easy, but when it's least convenient. Choose one daily routine where you tend to get irritated, commuting, waiting in line, dealing with delays. Use that moment to breathe, observe your thoughts, and repeat a Stoic phrase. Make it your dojo. Chapter 9. The Dignity of Restraint. There is a quiet nobility in restraint, not the kind that suppresses and bottles things up, but the kind that channels energy into strength. It is not repression, but redirection. It is not silence born of fear, but silence born of command. The Stoic understands that restraint is not about appearing calm to others. It is about being centered in truth within yourself. It is the ability to govern your own internal world, no matter the disturbance around you. To feel the heat rise and yet not let it leak into your words or actions, that is strength under control. When someone mocks you and you smile, when the world shakes and you stay rooted, when people provoke and you offer kindness instead of vengeance, this is not weakness. This is power refined. This is strength not broadcast for show, but expressed through stability. It's not that you don't feel the pull of retaliation, it's that you've trained yourself to hold the higher ground. The ability to carry your temper without letting it spill on others is one of the purest forms of leadership, and the person you lead first, and most often, is yourself. Restraint shows that you are not ruled by others' actions, only by your own principles. It shows that you are not pushed around by moods, but anchored in values. It reveals that your internal compass hasn't been hijacked by someone else's behavior. You are no longer reactive to every spark, because you've become a keeper of your own flame. The Stoics didn't walk away from conflict because they feared it. They walked away because they knew not every fire deserved oxygen. They knew some arguments are traps, some provocations are invitations to lose yourself, and they decided their peace was more precious than proving a point. Memorize this phrase. That's their behavior, not mine. Say it in the moment. Whisper it when your patience is tested. Use it as a shield against emotional contagion. Let it remind you that what someone else says or does is their choice, but how you carry yourself, how you respond, that's yours. Their disrespect does not require your reaction. Their chaos does not need to become your storm. In that separation, you'll find your power. Chapter 10. Respond like a philosopher. What does it mean to respond like a philosopher? It means that every word, every action, every glance is chosen, not spilled. It is intentionality elevated into a way of life. It means you speak not to vent, but to guide, not to injure, but to illuminate, not to sound clever, but to bring clarity. Your speech becomes a form of service, not a tool for ego, but an expression of principle. A philosopher responds not to impress, but to improve. The Stoics believed that philosophy is not something you study, it's something you live. It's not confined to books or classrooms. It breathes in your habits. It walks with you into conflict. You embody it in your responses, in your patience, in your silence, in your courage to speak truth gently or not at all. To respond like a philosopher is to ask, what is wise here? What serves the greater good? What action aligns with courage, justice, temperance, or wisdom? And then to choose not what feels best, but what is best. Imagine being someone who others look to in chaos because you do not react, you respond. Because you do not mirror the disorder around you, you anchor the space with calm. You slow down, you assess. You choose words that build, not bruise. You remain kind under pressure, firm under threat, and graceful in defeat. Your dignity becomes a compass for others to follow. Your consistency becomes a quiet influence. You are not performing, you are living the philosophy. To respond like a philosopher is not to remove emotion, it is to elevate it. It's to acknowledge that emotion is part of the human experience, but that it must be led, not obeyed. To run your impulses through the filter of reason. To not be swept away by the current of your first reaction, but to anchor yourself in the deeper waters of perspective. It is the art of translating emotion into clarity and clarity into action. To see the world not just as it is, but through the lens of virtue. Not merely with the eyes, but with the soul. It's about choosing principles over preferences, values over volatility. It's asking not what's easiest, but what's right. What response builds the world you want to live in? What response honors your highest self, not your momentary mood? In every challenge, there is a moment to insert virtue, a moment to be more than just reactive flesh, but reflective spirit. And in doing so, to bring a little more order to the chaos, a little more stillness to the storm, a little more grace to the grind, a little more truth to the noise, a little more light into dark rooms, the light that doesn't come from shouting louder, but from seeing clearer, from acting not because you're pushed, but because you are pulled by a deeper intention. This is not about being perfect, it's about being principled, about staying aligned, not with pride or performance, but with character. It's about building habits that become reflexes of integrity. It's about choosing moment by moment to stand where it's harder but higher. It's about choosing to live as a lighthouse rather than a siren, to guide rather than to scream, to illuminate rather than to impress, to respond with calm clarity when the world is clouded by noise. Before responding in any high-stakes conversation, ask, if this response were printed on the front page of a newspaper tomorrow, would I be proud? Let your responses reflect your highest self, not your lowest impulse. You will not be remembered for every emotion you felt. You will be remembered for how you acted, for how you carried yourself when it was hard, for how you treated others when you could have lashed out, for the moments when you chose clarity over chaos, virtue over vengeance. To live like a Stoic is to remember this. Your power is not in controlling the world, it's in controlling how you meet it. The insult is not the problem, the betrayal is not the end, the delay is not the enemy. Your reaction is, your response is the cure. You were not born to be ruled by every emotion. You were born to rule over them, to shape them, to direct them, to rise above them. Let the world provoke you. Let it poke, let it test, and let your response echo, not with noise, but with meaning. The Stoic does not fight every fire. They become the water, the stillness, the calm, and in doing so, they change not just their lives, but the world around them. So the next time life presses in, don't react, respond.